Hey there, everyone. Excited to have my friend Kenny Walden, 2Raw2Real on social media with us. He was one of, I'd say, the top influencers of the 2024 election cycle. Best buddies with Kamala Harris. You may have seen him dancing with her, and we'll hear about some of those moments. Kenny, tell people what you do and how you got into all of this.
Hey, what's up? My name is Kenny, better known as 2Raw2Real on all platforms. You can find me on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. Twitter's my stomping ground. That's where I get down. But you can find me on Instagram and pretty much everywhere. Anywhere you can find a loudmouth, you'll see me flapping my gums. But I started off honestly never thinking that I would ever do content creation. I honestly just turned on the camera, was inspired by people like Reese Colbert, who just used their platform, started from literally nothing. I mean, it all started from Twitter. And it just started off as me advocating for Kamala Harris back in the 2020 primary. And then it kind of just jumped off since then. I was able to, garner a lot of attention with my quirky, comedic style of politicking that kind of resonated with a lot of people that kept people engaged and entertained, but also educated on what's going on. And I think for the last 3 or 4 years, I've curated my content to where I have been able to successfully say, from being just some random schmandom on the internet, I am a full content creator.
That's for sure. Boy, have you been making waves. So I want to hear about a couple things. So first of all, what is your process of creating content? Because I know some people, they're the guy that's just gonna, read off AP Newswire or just try to get you breaking news as fast as possible. I feel like your stuff, it is so creative. Sometimes you're singing or whatever, so that must take some amount of time, and yet you do it within a window that it's still relevant and important. And then I think you're also very accurate. I haven't noticed you ever really sharing disinformation. I think unfortunately a lot of creators that are rushing to kind of go viral first do that. So how do you go about making a video on a new news story, for example?
So for the most part, I'm only gonna make content if I have something to add to the conversation. I'm not going to, flood the zone with, doom and gloom, and I always have to add my own little spin on it. My whole thing is comedy. My whole thing is, keeping people engaged, and sometimes it's just, reading people down. I mean, reading folks for filth, but also fact checking. But as far as making sure I have my sources and make sure that I'm citing everything in all my videos, because in every video I make sure that anything that I'm commenting on, I'm showing you where I'm getting the information from. So I'm making sure that I'm fully factual. My integrity means everything to me. My word is all of it, and it's not worth trying to get a quick viral moment just because, oh, well, I want to be the first one to break the story. I want to make sure that whatever I'm putting out is factual because we live in the day and age of misinformation, disinformation. And we know that people believe the first thing that they see. So first impressions mean everything. And we have to be very careful about how we utilize our platform because we owe it not only to our audience, but we owe it to ourselves.
And speaking of integrity, and I do think you have a lot of integrity, I want to talk about the chorus program because I know you're a member of that. And it seemed like when that story came out, a lot of folks were questioning the integrity of people involved with that program. And I think it really raises some interesting questions about influencers in politics, particularly how influencers can get paid for the work that they do, but maybe there's a transparency issue. And obviously, this has been a problem on policymakers' radar for a decade plus now, and no action has really been taken at the government level where they would require disclosures or certain things like that. Can you talk a little bit about the chorus program, how you benefited from it, and what misconceptions there might have been from that reporting?
So there was a common misconception that we couldn't talk about Chorus. I'm one of actually the founders of Chorus, which is hilarious. We talked about this like coming off of the 2024 election. We knew that with Republicans flooding the zone with misinformation, disinformation, that corporate media isn't reliable anymore. We already understand that there's an implicit bias, or in certain cases, they're painting false equivalencies between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. We saw that Kamala Harris had to be pitch perfect. Donald Trump was able to be lawless, while Kamala Harris had to
Mhm.
be flawless. And we understand that when you're looking at social media, we don't have on the left side or left leaning, independent type of organizations where we can get information, get news sources, get stories, and actually be able to do it factually or have that rapid response when there's disinformation, misinformation. So what Brian Tyler Cohen did, he reached out to a lot of content creators. We tried to fundraise some money, reached out to donors, tried to figure out a way of getting content creators into this incubator program, which is nothing but
Mhm.
a training program. You learn how to curate your content. It's fully independent. You can post whatever you want to independently, as you see. I'm too raw to real. I say what I want to. Nobody tells me what to say. Nothing is scripted over here. Okay, I'm just
If
going
you
off the
go watch the
dome.
content, yeah, I think
Yeah,
you'll
everything
agree.
off the dome, going straight for my fierce fire and passion because I understand that, we need people that look like me, people who live like me, because to a lot of people's knowledge, they don't know that I don't do content creation full time. I have
Hmm.
a full-time job outside of this. And it's hard to be able to put the information out there in a rapid space
Yeah.
when I'm working. Like I'm on the clock. So while everything is happening, I'm like, oh God, what's going on? To where I have to rush home. Now I have to come up with some content in order to tell people what really happened to break it down so that they can get the information factually in a way that is going to be, consumed and processed in
Hmm.
people's mind to where they're actually able to understand it.
And you kind of mentioned obviously balancing a job with content creating, and you're a big content creator too, so it's really not just a hobby for you. Do you ever run into any tension at work or with coworkers or with people that have like seen you online and aren't comfortable with that sort of level of politicism kind of in the background in other spaces or not really?
Well, I don't talk politics at my job because I'm not allowed.
Yeah.
But there have been times where people have known or seen my
Hmm.
work. And for the most part, it's actually been nothing but love. Surprisingly, you'd be
Good.
surprised how many people, support you, not only privately, but publicly. And I have gotten nothing but positivity when it comes to people supporting the work that I do, especially when it comes to content creation and what I've been able to do in the political sphere.
I love that. And I know you mentioned also people like you not necessarily always having a voice in these spaces and that you're an advocate for your community in that regard as well. And I'm curious your thinking. One thing I've noticed is as the left tries to recreate its own media ecosystem, it does feel like they are sort of doubling down on a lot of the I don't know if we call them problems, but certainly inequities of the original media diversity and layout. So it does seem like, like the groups I think of, Midas Touch, David Pakman, Byron Tyler Cohen, top YouTubers are typically white male voices. Is there a similar effort? You see, I mean, I know I love your Tiffany and Zach show, The Big Three. You guys should check it out
Yeah,
on
you get
YouTube as
every
well.
Wednesday.
Every Wednesday, they do a great breakdown of the news of the week. And I wish that you guys had millions of followers just like some of these other YouTubers. Are you seeing any other space that's like kind of filling that void right now? Or maybe you disagree with that assessment too.
Well,
Feel
no,
free.
there's not that much representation, not that much black representation, queer representation. There isn't any of those things because unfortunately people tend to gravitate to people who look like them. And unfortunately, we don't have like the type of infrastructure to support,
Mhm.
black media. I do know that Roland Martin was able to curate and create his own Roland Unfiltered,
Yeah,
which is
love him.
unbossed, unfiltered,
He
truth
was ahead of the
speaking.
curve, I think, on a
Yes,
lot
he
of
was
that
way
stuff.
ahead of the
Years
curve. He
ahead.
left CNN and he said, "Look, I'm gonna do
Unbelievable.
this myself. Can't
Pretty
nobody
good.
tell me what to do. I'm not gonna be, beholden to anybody trying to censor me." So he
Mhm.
was before everybody. So I think Roland is a good example of what could be, unburdened by what has been, I guess. Had to throw that in.
And I know Mehdi Hassan, which is I'd say less of like a Democrat voice, but has also built, a successful media company on Substack. I guess speaking of that, part of it is I do think, the resources and people wanting to hear from folks that look like them, but I also feel like there's this unstated assumption that's come out of Hillary Clinton losing and Kamala Harris losing that, we're elevating folks like Tim Miller and the Bulwark, sort of these never Trump Republican voices, or these under 25-year-old white college broy type voices, or whatever. It does seem like the Graham Plattner of it all, if you want to call it, has pierced through in the media space. Whereas I feel like there's almost like okay, we need a messenger that can reach these Trump voters. And I don't know that we've seen any evidence that any of those sort of centrist voices, moderate voices, it's not really about the policies. It's more about the packaging, I think, that they think those are the communicators of the future of the party, the James Tallaricos, those types. And I'm not sure I see that as accurate, but I do think it's sort of an assumption that's been baked into some of the strategy that people have come away with from 2024. What do you think about that? Is it misguided?
I think it's very misguided. I think rather than trying to go after this imaginary voter that we're never going to get,
Right.
I think we need to start focusing on the people who were disenfranchised and decided to stay at home. We need to start reaching out to those voters and asking them, what was the reason? Why did you just kind of just give away your agency and allow somebody to have a say over your life and actually choose,
Right.
whether you have Medicaid, whether you have SNAP benefits, whether you'll be able to keep your, federal workforce job. Those are the things that we need to start, digging deep to realize what is it? Why are we not addressing voter apathy?
Hmm.
Because
And I
just
guess,
as many people who actually showed up to the polls, I mean, 1/3 of the country sat at home. And we have to
right.
understand, well, what policy, and we also need to start connecting the dots and having those real hard conversations about, because there's a lot of people who don't understand that there are systems set in place that can benefit them, that will actually
Mhm.
address their needs immediately. However, they just don't have the access to it.
Right.
So sometimes we got to just meet people where they are.
And I guess speaking of Grand Planner, so for those who don't know, last couple days, couple scandals have been shaking up Maine Senate primary race, where you had this sort of pod save David Hogg type candidate, went viral a couple times. You know, the Liz Smiths of the party, that's Pete Buttigieg's former common person, and all these people, calling him the voice of a generation, a once in a lifetime communicator, all the usual labels that we bring out, every other week. Some random guy goes viral and they decide that's who should be the future of the Democratic Party. And he sort of comes across as this working class oyster farmer. I think he's had a bit of a different background if you really dig in, but um, you know, got in trouble for having some tattoos, which he claims he didn't know were affiliated with Nazism, which, I mean, as a 40-plus-year-old adult, it's important to know what permanent markings you have on your body. And now maybe they found a second tattoo that also is related to Nazism. He had the first one covered up yesterday. Just defending Reddit posts and standing behind some of them. So it hasn't gone well, and it's sort of the same cliche that you would expect from some random guy you just found who went viral and you decided should be in the Senate with no prior experience. And there's this divide of, oh, well, Democrats can't accept the working class. I saw John Lovett say, oh, well, if we could only accept people from Harvard Law School, it's like, well, his opponent, Janet Mills, didn't go to Harvard Law School. She was a governor and she's had a lifetime of experience. Not to say think she's the number one best candidate in the world, but you know, what a false choice that it's either Harvard Law School or a bunch of random Nazi tattoos you didn't know about. So, what do you make of all of that? What's the direction of the party? I think Maine's a good example. I was just talking to the executive director of Swing Left on our last episode about these efforts to win seats that are right on the margin. And if there is really a strategy there to win over people who are open-minded but are going to be turned off if you pick the most extreme candidate. So, what do you think about some of that stuff?
I mean, somebody who said that he was the most effective, communicator, because I mean, if anything shows, he's the worst communicator because he couldn't answer any of these questions. He's still doubling down, thinking that black people don't tip. On top of that, he couldn't answer correctly why he got this tattoo. And even I think it was a former campaign staffer who just came out recently and said that
Yeah, his
she
political
did
director.
address him about the tattoo, educated him on the tattoo, and said that he knew damn well what this
Yeah,
tattoo
he
meant,
said
and he
he's a student of
decided to get it
military
covered up
history. He
yesterday.
knows.
I mean, this is weird. I mean, like, so he's, I don't know. I just feel like now that he's getting a lot of heat all of a sudden, even though this campaign staffer came to you weeks ahead of time to tell you to get this removed or at least
Yeah.
get ahead of the story, you decided not to until it was a backlash. And I don't like what's going on particularly, and I've always talked about it. I call them prejudiced progressives. The reason why I do that is because they always it's always on the back of people of color or the most marginalized, telling us that we just have to deal with it for the sake of it. And honestly, I don't think that we should. I don't think that we should be platforming somebody who has this, what is it? It's the death head symbol on his chest. It's not there anymore. But still, the fact that he
Yeah, and
carried
now
this
it's
for
some
years.
ugly thing he put over it. It's like so painful. I
I saw
mean,
it's like some
you can tell, by
animal
the way, you
twisted
can
up
tell
in a
he
box.
never thought about covering it up because if he even gave it 1 second thought, he would have picked anything else than he picked to cover it up. It is so ugly.
So you
Jesus.
seen the tattoo that he
Oh, he
replaced
had
with.
like a little animal like printed over it. Did you? I'll
It's
send it to
some
you
sort
after
of,
this.
it's either an eater with scoliosis. I'm
It's
not
really, it's,
sure.
oh
It's
my God.
twisted and turned. I don't know what's
It's
going on.
rough. It's really bad. I thought you could get it burned off now. Surely that would be a better option. But anyways, I think that's a really valid point. And like to see so many people, because I was actually one of the people that posted that interview clip where he doubles down on he says, I'm really sorry for a lot of the things I said on Reddit, but not the thing about black people not tipping because it was a genuine question, which then all these like leftist liberal people were like, well, it's true, it's true, it's true. It's like, oof, this is not the response you think it should be. Like,
Um, it's just
wild.
it's the anti-blackness of it all, and I think the main issue that I have with people making excuses for it is for somebody who's supposed to be, I guess, a great communicator is what they say. He's not taking the Mom Donnie approach. When Mom Donnie was questioned about things that he said in the past, whether it had been what he said about, NYPD, he
Mhm.
apologized, acknowledged it, and also said, I'm going to grow from this. It's a learning experience. I'm
Yeah.
human. I didn't see this from Plattner. I didn't see that at all. I didn't see any type of accountability. I don't see any type of growth. When faced with real questions, like let's say if he is, if he does go to the U.S. Senate, when we start asking questions about, his voting record or why he decided to confirm or deny certain judges, will he be able to, answer those questions, be held accountable, or is he going to just double down?
Yeah, and I think there's really this interesting discussion of learning and creating space for learning and accountability. And a lot of people found his first apology video, of which there, I think, been several at this point. Um, Compelling in that he talks about, getting married and finding purpose, but that all happened in his 30s. So, and he's 40 plus now. So I think it's just interesting this idea that like white men are so lost and at sea and they need to find purpose. And if they decide that purpose is a United States Senate seat, we're supposed to hand it over to them as part of their therapy journey. Like, what are you talking about? It's ridiculous. I mean, I'm all for growth, all for forgiveness. Yes, we should have an open mind. If these were things that he said in his 20s even, I think it'd be a different story. Some of the posts are as recent as 2018. And again, it's not like the growth came out of some local community experience or he served in office and, learned how to bring people together or any other thing that would then say, okay, yeah, like maybe he was a little bit weird and off after serving and that's relatable and we want to reward people that serve and blah, blah, blah. But there's really no inflection point that describes the change or that justifies him being in the United States Senate other than a couple of YouTubers online thinking it's a brilliant idea. So it is interesting. And what's more interesting to see and disappointing to see is folks like Rokana, who I've interviewed on here as well, immediately jump to say, oh, the Democrats were out with this Oppo research. First of all, CNN investigative reporters were the ones that uncovered much of this stuff.
Mm.
And second of all, I mean, it's not some vast DNC conspiracy, which everyone blames the DNC, which is not involved in any of this stuff at all, just to be clear. But that he has two Nazi adjacent tattoos on his body. I mean, when the Oppo dump is literally your own body, there's not much that you can say to blame the vast powers of the DNC. I mean, and of course, they're going to take this example where they picked a totally flawed candidate that none of them have heard of until the last month, that they're all in on now, that Bernie Sanders refuses to distance himself of, and he's going to flop, and they're going to blame it as rigged and all this stuff when really
It's
it has
the
nothing to do with them. You picked a
establishment.
terrible candidate. Like, duh. Crazy.
You know what's crazy about that? And I was trying to find Bernie's tweet particularly, or at least there was an exchange with, I don't know if it was a reporter or what, about what Bernie Sanders justifying his actions. He said he wouldn't drop his support for Plattner despite
Yes.
the Nazi tattoo. Bernie Sanders, this is what he said. He said, as a young man who went through really difficult experiences in Iraq, how did just going through experiences in Iraq means that we're gonna excuse the racism, the anti-Semitism. We're just gonna excuse those things.
And also, like, what's the point? There are so many people that have faced those similar circumstances, more people certainly that can fill the United States Senate. By the way, we have a lot of those folks in government right now. There's no shortage of people with a service background who are in government. That's just not true. And by the way, he lies in that statement, I think, and says he did 4 tours, which is also not accurate. But it's just shocking. And I mean, it's one of those conversations as well that bleeds into the hypocrisy, I think, of the Bernie wing of the party because we've heard them bashing Janet Mills, who's Graham Plattner's opponent, for being
She's
old. Bernie
77, but
Sanders
Bernie
is running
Sanders is
for
84.
re-election. He's older than her, and he's been less effective as a leader. He has no experience like a governor, like she is. And then their excuse is, well, he thinks young, he thinks new, but then he's defending a guy for dismissing his sexual commentary about women and not getting too drunk and all these offensive comments, and obviously doesn't care about the racist comments. But we know that about Bernie Sanders. And so isn't that a kind of an old way of thinking? I mean, to some extent, I think that is old thinking. It's exactly what you'd expect from the Bernie Sanders generation to say. And so they give him a pass on that. It feels hypocritical, but
No, it's very hypocritical, but this isn't something new from Bernie. I remember back in the 2020 primary, he doubled down with his, support, well, garnering support from Joe Rogan. And when black people came to Bernie Sanders saying, this man called us the N-word 25 times, and then he also compared going to a movie theater in the ghetto to Planet of the Apes. He compared us to animals. I mean, like, and you're okay with that? He said, yeah, I'm fine with it. Again, it's always on the back of the most marginalized when it comes to this progressive wing. And again, like I said, I call them prejudiced progressives, whether they know it or unknowingly know it. But even with that, let's go back. Let's go all the way back. 'Kay, you said a Hillary alumni, right? Let's go all the way back to 2016.
bring
Remember
me
when
back. I
black
love to go
voters
back there.
supported Hillary Clinton and all of a sudden black voters don't know what's best for them? We're low information voters. Remember that? Wasn't that fun? We don't
Mhm.
know what's best for us. We just need to go ahead and listen to Whitey, is what they've been telling us for a long time. And it just goes into it. But my concern with Plattner is, especially with this, is this going to be another John Fetterman moment? I remember that we were sounding the alarms then,
Mm.
that this man literally chased an unarmed black man down the street with a shotgun. And when people of color were sounding the alarm about that, they said, oh, well, no, he's progressive. He's like Bernie Sanders. Now,
But
Bernie
that was
didn't
that was
openly
before the
endorse
brain
the
damage.
man, but they compared him to Bernie Sanders. They said
Yeah.
he's not the typical politician. He doesn't wear suits. He doesn't really look like he bathes either. But that's besides the point. But these are the non-typical politicians who you just don't want to see progressives win. Well, he won. And what are we seeing from John Fetterman in this moment?
Yep. I think you're so right. So instead of, I guess we've been sort of super negative on the progressives, but I think you're progressive in the policies you support and the outcomes that you hope people get to live with. So who do you see as rising progressive voices pushing things forward in maybe a less problematic way than we were just describing?
I mean, there's so many different examples and stuff like that. I mean, Jasmine Crockett is one of my favorite. Maxwell Frost is one of my favorites. I haven't seen him give a bad take ever,
Yeah, he's
honestly.
great.
He's not negative. He's not trying to
And I
beat
think
down the
he's,
party.
just on that point, I think a lot of people have been saying the takeaway from this Plattner stuff is can younger digital candidates make it through the
Well,
purity
let's look
test
at the
of the party?
youngest.
It's like, first of all, there are so many people. First of all, he's old, he's 40 plus. Second of all, the purity test to not have a Nazi tattoo and not have a bunch of bigoted shit that you posted online, like, is not that high of a bar. And second of all, we have so many counterexamples from AOC, Maxwell Frost, Jasmine Crockett, like you name it, who haven't, Zoran Mamdani, if you want, haven't been stymied by any sort of, purity tests by anyone, because there's obviously a reasonable baseline to assess people on. And frankly, there's a ton of young people that don't have some crazy skeletons in their closets. So that's such an empty talking point to me.
But I think the purity politics is the most dumbest shit ever because a lot of these the litmus test when it comes to this politics, they can't even pass it themselves, and that's my
Right,
issue.
right. Just so
Like,
people know, Graham Platter worked at Blackwater. I mean, the same people that said they couldn't vote for Hillary Clinton because of speeches she gave to Goldman Sachs are 100% behind this guy. So it's shocking to see. It's unfortunate because I think it's just led to such a divisive moment yet again when folks are trying to unite against Trumpism. At the same time, I think there's maybe something a little healthy about sort of just getting through this and like just getting tired of it because I think honestly, a lot of people are willing to just cave to the further left wing of the party and be bullied and say, all right, yeah, we know you're not going to show up and vote, so whatever you want, we'll just try to do it your way. Their way isn't often well thought out. It's usually not feasible. And there's often a lot of false promises embedded in there and a lot of thinking that overlooks, as you put it, some of the most marginalized communities. So, interesting moment for the party. Glad it's happening now instead of in a year from now, of course. But
I know.
what is one positive thing that we can end on that you think about that's going well for the party right now?
I think the main thing that's going on right now is I love the fact that Democrats are doubling down, not backing down. Even when it comes to this government shutdown, I've seen Hakeem Jeffries rise to the occasion. I've seen Chuck Schumer, who I don't like, is rising to the occasion. I mean, you got to give them their things. When we sit here and ask them to fight for us and actually curate their content, because good Lord, it was a mess at first. But being able to resonate and be able to, effectively communicate what's happening in government and whose fault and whose feet this lies at. I think Democrats have been doing an excellent job when it comes to that. I'm a true blue Democrat as far as like registration, etc., et cetera, et cetera. But however, it's not a cult over here. And I think the reason why a lot of people including myself, are so hypercritical of, our party is because it's our party. It's just like parents, how they're hypercritical when it comes to their kids and stuff like that. You want to see the best of them. You're not necessarily trying to beat them down, but you're not going to hold anybody else's kids to a higher standard than you hold your own. So that's the only
I love
reason
that.
why. And, just as passionate about my party because I want us to win.
Well, Kenny, thank you so much for your time. I love your content. You've made a real impact, and I think, I'm super proud of watching how big you've grown and hope to see a lot more of that. So, guys, follow him. His logo is right behind him, I think, right, for all socials. So, catch his
That's
stuff
too
there
raw
for
to real,
sure.
y'all.